Attorney Kathleen Rice is joining us from New York City tonight. DA, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me, Liz.
I feel like I just saw you.
We did, in fact, less than 24 hours ago. It seems like so long ago.
Well, because there were perhaps not everyone who is viewing now was viewing then, there are a couple of moments in that debate that I'd like to revisit if you would not mind.
Sure.
Okay, let's start with just a clip of when things got a little bit heated between yourself and one of your now 4 opponents.
With all due respect to Senator Schneiderman, you can't hold yourself out as a reformer when the ethics bill that you passed did not include 2 absolutely essential bits of reform. Full disclosure for lawyer legislators, of which Mr. Schneiderman, State Senator Schneiderman, is one, and an independent state ethics commission. You can't call yourself a reformer when you don't include those in a reform package. The job of the Attorney General is to make legal decisions. No one in this race has made more legal decisions about when to go forward on a case, when not to go forward on a case, when to prosecute, when not to prosecute. Those are the decisions that you have to make. No one in this race has investigated members of their own party. That experience and that independence is what we need in the next Attorney General.
Okay, so I picked this because it's pretty much your mantra, if you will, one of the central issues of your platform, that you are not of Albany, and you have criticized those candidates, particularly Senator Schneiderman, who are of Albany, saying that they do not have sufficient ability to clean up Albany. However, we've seen Andrew Cuomo actually been quite successful with his knowledge of Albany, managed to get some laws passed, student loan code of conduct. He got a local government efficiency bill passed, and he did that by lobbying the legislature. By running against Albany, how are you then subsequently going to strike that balance of getting things done and also investigating Albany?
Well, I, too, have been very active in my time as DA in Nassau County. From a legislative perspective, I've gone up to Albany. I've lobbied the legislature for new groundbreaking historic laws regarding drunk drivers, the worst of the worst drunk drivers, which has now given a better ability for the DAs all across the state to prosecute the worst of the worst drunk drivers. So I know how Albany works. But what we all know is the damage that a broken Albany is to the taxpayers, to voters, to every single New Yorker. You don't have to be a part of Albany. In fact, I don't believe that you can be a part of be an Albany insider in order to be a part of the reform. There are very, very fundamental conflicts of interest that Senator Schneiderman is going to face because he is an ex-member of the legislature, that I think is going to preclude him from being involved in the #1 role that the next Attorney General has to play, and that is the guardian of the public trust. You need to know how Albany works. You need to know how it doesn't work. You don't need to be an insider. You can't be an insider.
Do you have any, just off the bat, idea about where you would start? For example, if you were in fact elected to the Attorney General's office, what would you go after first?
The first thing that I would do, and I laid this out in my public integrity agenda, is increase our outreach to whistleblowers. We all know that there is waste, fraud, and abuse. We all know that it is in our government. And the first step to reforming government, aside from insisting on full disclosure for lawyer legislators, an independent state ethics commission, those are just 2 fundamental steps that we can take that I might add were 2 elements that were left out of the ethics bill that was passed by the Senate, that was shepherded through the Senate by Senator Schneiderman. You can't call a reform package comprehensive without those 2 very essential tools. But putting that aside, the way that we're going to be able, the next Attorney General is going to be able to wade into the area of public corruption, given the limited powers that the Attorney General has right now, is through my suggestion of increasing protection for whistleblowers, those people who are in the know and know where the corruption is.
Okay, but just regarding this issue of the ethics bill, I mean, really, in Albany, of course, it takes 2 to tango, In the Assembly didn't want to push this through either, and in part that's because there are a number of attorneys, and the biggest one there is Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver. He's connected to a firm that has given a lot of campaign contributions to your campaign. So do you not find yourself conflicted in that same way?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, the speaker, Sheldon Silver, is supporting Richard Brodsky, another opponent of mine in this race. Weitz and Luxembourg is the principals in that law firm are Long Islanders who have supported me since my first run for DA back in 2005. They are intimately aware of the job that I have done as DA, and that's the basis for their support. There is absolutely no conflict. I do not have a relationship with Sheldon Silver similar to the one that the two legislators in this race do, Mr. Brodsky and State Senator Schneiderman. So I don't believe that that is going to cause me to be conflicted out of anything. And I have been, Liz, very open about, and I'm a lawyer, about the need for full disclosure for lawyer legislators. Why? Why is it important to the voters for there to be full disclosure? Because we need to know if there are any inherent conflicts in the private work that our public elected officials as part-time legislators are doing.
Okay, let's move on to another one of these clips from last night's debate. This time, actually, you were on the receiving end. It was almost sort of split between yourself and Senator Schneiderman, of course, at this point now perceived as two front-runners in the race. Let's take a watch.
Kathleen, you have acknowledged that you didn't vote for 18 years and you only registered as a Democrat 5 years ago. You were living in the battleground state of Pennsylvania during the 2000 election between Al Gore and George Bush. When you were asked about why you didn't vote, you said that you didn't really get the connection between voting and the policies you now claim to believe in. What was it about George Bush's platform or Al Gore's platform that prevented you from seeing the importance of that race and casting a vote in that critical election?
Well, I have very openly and honestly said that my lack of voting was a serious mistake that I deeply regret. And I've been very honest about that. And I spend a lot of time now telling people not to make the same mistake that I make.
Okay, so you actually have talked quite a bit about this, and it has cost you, actually, in a number of places, including the New York Times endorsement cited the fact that you had not voted until 2002 when you were 37, calling that troubling. The Albany Times-Union cited it also. Both of these newspapers endorsed Senator Schneiderman. I mean, that question, when he put it to you, and I understand that you are, you think it was a mistake, and you've said that many times, but what were you thinking? What prevented you from voting in the presidential? Were you just really not paying attention at the time, or was it something else?
When I was 26 years old, Liz, I began my fight for communities, for individuals, and for families in Brooklyn, in East New York, in East Flatbush, in Canarsie. And my job was to seek justice. And very often what I saw was the tragedy that so many families were left in when the system failed them. And at that very young age, I was very disillusioned about the connection between government, between the political process, and families and individuals who were in desperate need of help. And I think that that affected my lack of being involved in the political process. But as anyone who gets the benefit of growing older in life, I am 20 years from that point right now. I have had many life experiences in my fight for social justice, and I have come to the point where I recognize that there can be a more positive connection between the ballot box and our communities. No one in this race, Liz, has fought for social justice longer and harder than I have. I have spent my 19 years in public service fighting for social justice. I will hold my record up to anyone's record in this race. But I think the important thing also is that when I was asked about this question, I gave an honest answer. And that's what people want. Too often we have politicians who dance around issues and aren't honest with the voters. I am honest with the voters, for better or for worse, because that's the only way I know to be.
What was it? Was there one moment that made you say, aha, I should be involved in politics, I should vote, and was it just because you personally wanted to run for office, or was it something else entirely?
I think it was just a maturation that happens with your experience, especially me in public service, and with my experience seeing more the ability that government can have a positive, that there is an ability for the government to have a positive effect. But remember, in my early years, there was a disillusionment there that over time I began to say, you know what, I think that there is a better way, that government can serve communities and individuals. And I actually have thrown my hat in the ring more than most people ever will in a lifetime, in a way that is very critical and under the gun and under the spotlight. And I open my life up to that kind of scrutiny because I think that public officials should open their life up to that kind of scrutiny. And I have done that very openly and honestly. And again, no one has the record of fighting for families, for children, for women, for victims of child abuse, domestic violence, for the taxpayer, for consumers. No one has fought harder to level the playing field in our communities. I'm not just talking, Liz, about talking the talk. I'm talking about walking the walk.
Okay.
No one in this race has done that more than I have.
We have one more clip that I'd like to play for you. This time you are getting a question from Sean Coffey.
You've been a career prosecutor. You've put a lot of people in jail, and you talk about the legal judgments you've made. Could you tell us something in your background that could give the New York electorate confidence that you know the difference between a CDO and a CDS, that you know the role of an audit committee in a company, that you understand anything whatsoever about Wall Street?
The next Attorney General is going to have to play a very thank you for the question. I'm glad to take some of the focus away from Senator Schneiderman to do him that favor. The role of the Attorney General, to be sure, includes policing Wall Street. But just as I don't believe that you can be an Albany insider to reform Albany, I don't believe, similarly, that you can be a Wall Street insider and police Wall Street. There have been, yes, I am a criminal prosecutor. I have spent 19 years advocating on behalf of victims and consumers and taxpayers. That is what I've spent my entire career doing, making the kind of legal decisions that the Attorney General has to make every single day.
Okay, so again, I understand your response there, but you didn't answer the question specifically. Do you know what a CDO or a CDS is, and is it relevant to the job as the Attorney General?
Well, I think it's very easy for a Wall Street insider to say, do you know a CDS? Do you know what a CDO is? And the fact of the matter is that by asking that question, Sean Coffey made my case for me, that you can act as an insider, whether it be in Albany or on Wall Street. And the fact is, you show that you are part of the system that needs to be reformed. It's very easy to take shots at someone who has spent their life advocating on behalf of victims and consumers and taxpayers like I have. And the interesting thing, Liz, is in the beginning of this race, when everyone else was getting into the race before I did, they all pointed to their time as prosecutors in various offices in their background as a way of showing their ability to do the job of Attorney General. Until I came on board with my record of being a criminal prosecutor, everyone knows that being a prosecutor requires making the legal decisions. That is the primary role, the primary obligation of the Attorney General. Not to fall back on your partners in a law firm, not to fall back on your colleagues in the legislature and blame them for not being able to get the job done. It's being in the position where the buck stops with you, like I have been for the past 5 years and throughout my career of having to make these decisions. And I think that that's a cheap shot. I think it's a political ploy that's very easy to make when you have someone who clearly has a record that is resonating with the voters. And I understand why he feels that that is threatening.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I'm sure that we are going to be seeing more of you in the upcoming week because the primary is right around the corner. You have been picking up a lot of endorsements. You had one from Liz Holtzman, your former New York City Comptroller, the current New York City Comptroller, John Liu, and we'll be seeing you on the air as well, I'm sure. So thanks very much, District Attorney Rice, for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Liz.